So the example 4, the first thing on A there is its sine of x. I'm going to write out my parent table and go ahead and graph it. Now when I go to do my transformation, what is this 2 now going to do to my graph? What do I expect to see?
Stretch the x.
Is it horizontal or vertical?
Horizontal.
It's horizontal because it's with the x. And it's going to be either a stretch or compression because it's being multiplied, but which one would it be?
Compression.
It's a compression because remember x does the opposite. You think multiplying by 2 makes it bigger, but it's going to compress. So it's a horizontal compression by what number?
1/2.
Good, the reciprocal. And that's why it's the compression because really it's by 1/2.
That's what's up.
So when I go to do my table, is there anything that's going to affect my x's?
Yeah.
Yes. What?
1/2.
So what are we going to do with that 1/2?
We're going to multiply.
Okay, yeah, because it says it's 2 times, which means we're going to divide by 2. But we know dividing by 2 is the same as multiplying by the 1/2, right? And that's really going to help us when we use these fractions to multiply by the 1/2. So we don't have a fraction within a fraction. So is there anything that's going to affect my y's? No. Alright, so since my y's don't change, I'm just going to do them. And then let's multiply all of our y's by 1/2. So what's 0 times 1/2? And what's pi over 2 times 1/2?
Pi over 4.
And then pi times 1/2?
Pi over 2 times.
And 3 pi over 2 times 1/2?
2 pi over 4.
3 pi over 4? And then 2 pi times 1/2? 1 pi. Now, question is where's pi over 4 on my graph?
Between 1, 0, and pi.
Right, it's halfway between 0 and pi over 2. But if nothing else, guys, if you're confused, here's pi, correct? Let's see what each line will be. Well, how many boxes do I have then between 0 and pi? 4 of them, which means each line is going to represent a 1 pi over 4. So this first one would be 1 pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, which is reduced, 3 pi over 4, and then pi is 4 pi over 4 reduced. Alright, so let's go ahead and graph. So we have 0, 0, pi over 4, 1, pi over 2, 0, 3 pi over 4, negative 1. Uh-oh, I meant to erase that green line. Let me just kind of do that here. And then we have pi 0. So check. You told me it was a horizontal compression. So does it look like I grabbed that graph horizontally, so from the left and the right, and I compressed it in together?
Yeah.
It does. I squished it in. Alright, so for 4b, we're going to graph cosine of x. And so my parent table, and I do this every time because it helps me. I have to see it and I don't have it written down on anything. Plus, the more times you write it, the more likely you're going to remember it. Alright, and be careful when you go to graph this one, they change the scale on us. So your x-axis changed, so be careful. So there's my parent function. And now this says x divided by 2. That's the same thing, dividing by 2 is the same thing as multiplying by what?
2.
No, dividing by 2 is not multiplying by 2.
By 1/2.
Yes, by 1/2.
How can you start at the origin if 0 is...
Up, thank you. I graph sign.
Miss Youngblood, how dare.
I know, and I recorded it, but it's all good.
No, maybe you should just restart this whole recording because everyone's laughing and all that.
Alright, so we're going to go ahead and continue this video, even though we had a little bit of discussion going on there. It's all good, though. And I'm going to correct my mistakes. Now I'm going to graph this one correctly. So, I was zoomed in, and I was not looking at my table. I was going by what I was thinking, and while I was doing sine and not cosine. Alright, so now I've got the correct graph on there. And back to our transformation thing. We had said x divided by 2 is the same as 1/2 times x. So what is that divided by 2 or that 1/2 going to do to my graph? Is it vertical or horizontal?
It's a horizontal stretch.
It is a horizontal, good, stretch by 2. So when I go to do my table, what does that do?
It makes it bigger.
So it's going to affect the x or the y's? The x, how?
It's gonna stretch it out.
Yeah, it says divided by 2, so we know that means we're going to multiply by 2, right? And my y's aren't going to change. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite my y's here real quick. And then I'm going to multiply all of my x's by 2. So what was 0 times 2?
0.
And what is pi over 2 times 2? And what is pi times 2?
2 pi.
Hopefully you're seeing the pattern, right? Because everything we do with the graphs is got a pattern to it. So if it's 0, 1 pi, 2 pi, what do you think the next two are going to be?
3 pi, 4 pi.
All right, so let's find out. So 3 pi over 2 times 2 is 3 pi. And 2 pi times 2 is 4 pi. So y'all were right. So let's go ahead and graph this. And then check it. Does it look like we went horizontally, so from the left and right, and stretched it out? It does.